All right. So, for anybody listening or watching, this is going to be, as you can tell by the title of the episode, whatever I choose to name it, this is going to be a little bit different than my normal episode. Instead of having an author on to talk about a book that they've got coming out soon, I've got the crew back. I've got Jesse Lawrence and Greg Greenback. And if that means anything to you, it should mean probably we're going to be talking about some Stephen Graham Jones. So I want to take a second to thank both of you. Jesse, welcome. Thanks for joining again.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
And Greg, thanks for taking some time to talk to us today.
Absolutely. It's good to see you again. 2 weeks in a row for me jumping on a webcast with you. So great to see you again.
Yeah, and
Maybe we might
we're
talk
gonna
about that a little bit later.
yeah, we'll have an opportunity to share our kind of crazy adventures because I feel like if we talk about this in a chronology of 2024, it kind of builds and builds because like it started out like any other year, really, if you ask me. And at the beginning of the year, probably at the end of last year, at the end of 2023, we were all excited about the Angel of Indian Lake. So
Yeah.
like the stars were in our eyes. The finale of the trilogy was coming, and we were all very excited about that. But we also knew that I Was a Teenage Slasher was coming, so we were like, this is a huge year for Stephen Graham Jones. Those two books, I'm just going to put it in your minds right now, everybody listening. Two books from Stephen Graham Jones was going to be a huge year. That's how I felt. I feel
Yeah.
like that's how you guys felt too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Two full
Yeah.
novels coming out in 1 year.
Fucking what children we were with what has happened in the meantime. So yeah, like we started out the year with an idea that we were just going to do a deep dive of all three books. And so we, Hard as a Chainsaw, we recorded that episode and posted it toward the end of January. And then beginning of March, we released our deep dive of Don't Fear the Reaper. And then shortly after Angel of Indian Lake came out, a few days after it came out, is when we dropped our deep dive of the Angel of Indian Lake, and kind of like tied everything back together. And so, yeah, at that point, I think still it was just okay. We just had these great conversations about these three books, and now it's just Teenage Slasher. We're just focused on and excited about Teenage Slasher. But before we move past the talk about the deep dives of the trilogy, how did you guys feel about that? Like, for me, rereading those books and kind of having people to explore deeper some thoughts or like illuminate things that I wasn't aware of it's one of my favorite things about reading. And so, do either of you have any thoughts about like the experience of doing these deep dives and having the conversations?
I have two thoughts. One is it's great to be able to have these conversations because there's so much to explore in these novels, as you would probably with a lot of novels because they're hundreds of pages long and there are multiple threads going. But especially with Stephen's work, where as we all know with the Indian Lake trilogy, they are so closely related to the entire history of slasher cinema. So there's a lot of references, there's a lot of rules and kind of the metaphysics and psychodynamics of the genre that he plays on and at times subverts. So there's just so much meaty stuff to talk about. My second thought is those conversations kind of go all over the place. It's so hard to just organize it because again, there's just like so much to dive into. So if you go back, if you haven't listened to those deep dives and you go back, it may seem like we're kind of meandering a little bit because really like there is just so much to discuss. So it's complicated to do those kind of deep dives in a really structured way, especially when we're like so excited to jump onto another this other tangent here. In any given book, but yeah, it was very enjoyable, and it did help me. It was great to go back and reread the books, pick up on threads I hadn't maybe quite pulled together, especially when you're talking about like in the Angel of Indian Lake, there is like a reappearance of a character who dies at the beginning of My Heart is a Chainsaw, and I'm like, man, Stephen is pulling together all of these threads across all of his books. That's a lot of fun to kind of go into and pull all the pieces together. And I still think Dark Mill South is my favorite of all the killers.
Ooh,
He's
I love
strong
the Lake
words.
Witch a lot too, but I think Dark Mill South is so scary.
it's definitely menacing. I mean, doing those deep dives was a total blast. It's always fun just hearing other people's views or angles on the material, and seriously, any excuse to reread, those books or any of the other ones is, yeah, I'm gonna jump at that.
So I usually consider you, Jesse, as being the person who has read the most Stephen Graham Jones and for the longest. And so, one question I would throw at you, as being someone who's been reading Jones's stuff for literal decades and probably more rereads than anybody I know, what is your impression of the stuff he's writing now? Uh, and to to put my flavor on it, um, it just seems like it's more accessible. Like he's still smart and in love with just the gore and the craziness of things, but like he's found a way to really tap into the people reading it in a way that I felt he was looking for before. But that's just kind of my general idea. But like you being someone who has such experience and intimate experience and read things that, maybe other people haven't. Um, how do you feel about how Jones's writing is today versus maybe over the decades?
I think like just kind of over the decades, like it's not like there's necessarily been a huge transformation or this oh wow moment type thing. Cue the magic smoke and the little flashy fire finger things and all those nice tricks. I think a lot of it, or at least one thing, is things that I can't rightfully speak to, like all the technical jargon, because it's like the knowledge lives in my brain, but I forget the terms and mix them up. So
Sure.
we're
Yeah.
talking probably about stuff like syntax and whatnot. Might be a noticeable difference, but maybe that's what has led to that accessibility. That whether it's only perceived accessibility or not, maybe people reading just kind of caught up to something that he was already doing, which gets it out further into the world. So we get, like an even amplified perception of accessibility that way. But you kind of saw that back all the way back in All the Beautiful Sinners, though. That
Yeah.
that book has such scope to it. It really is like, a Silence of the Lambs, all a Jonathan Demme type thing. Everything that he's tackling in just this one central story, and how it spans decades too. But then in the rewriting of that or the other draft of it, which Stephen has said he preferred, is kind of the trimmed down version. The accessibility is just, it's completely there. It's so we've been seeing that for a while, I feel like. But everything always starts small and then grows.
I
That's a
feel
really
like just and have certainly have not read Stephen for as long as Jesse has, and some of the folks who've been like his early readers for decades, but are some of his longtime fans. But this may just be my perception, but I feel like the way he writes now is even more closely aligned with how he speaks. So if I'm hearing him on an interview, it's like I hear his patterns and his just little things he throws in, like yeah at the end of a sentence, right? Things like that. I see a lot more of that in his writing now. So I think it's just come to it's kind of evolved into his writings evolved into or maybe it's his way of speaking has evolved into to become closer to his actual writing style. So and it's interesting, especially to hear the audiobooks where he narrates the acknowledgments, and you just get the sense of of the way he's reading his own writing and the way he sounds. You really get a sense of his vocalization of things.
after the deep dives, we had a plan that the next thing we were going to do was a deep dive. We had a couple of ideas for episodes that we were going to do. We were going to do a deep dive of I Was a Teenage Slasher. That was definitely something that we were kicking around. And then we had an idea that we were going to, you know what? I think it was just deep dive of I Was a Teenage Slasher for a while.
Yeah.
And so finally, I get a copy of I Was a Teenage Slasher, and I'm reading through it. And I get to a point in the book where Jones says something about one of the characters, and he says something to the effect of like, she had to solve for X. And I was like, I know that is a reference to a Jones story, Solve for X. And I had a suspicion that it was in after the People Lights had gone off. And so I went to Amazon and I just typed in After the People Lights Have Gone Off. And a book cover that was unfamiliar to me appeared on the screen. And I was like, well, hello. And so I looked at the listing. It was by not Dark House Press, and it was with a future publication date. And I was like, what the heck's happening here? And so, of course, naturally, I immediately screenshot that and I start talking about it to everybody. Everybody at the time being Greg and Jesse. And then I think after I got a what the hell from one of you guys, I was like, well, I'm posting this because this is like hot news.
And you got to understand that After the People Lights have gone off has been out of print for years. It's one of, I think, the most sought after out of print Stephen Graham Jones books that are out there. It is an incredible collection with just hard hitter after hard hitter of short stories, including Solve for X, which I think closes out the book. Trying to find a copy of it on the online markets it's really, really pricey. So the fact that this apparently is getting a reissue and it's going to be back in print is actually really big news for Stephen Graham Jones readers and collectors.
Yeah. Massive. Thanks for that context too. Because I'm like, I'm telling this and I'm like, it's like I'm telling it to you guys who know. But for the listeners who aren't aware, yeah, this was a huge deal because, like you said, it's almost impossible to find unless you want to spend like hundreds of dollars on a used paperback. So, then I start posting it on social media, like, hey guys, look at this. I'm excited. And Greg messages me because Greg had taken it and was sharing it as well. And he says, oh, hey, we probably have to take this down. And the story goes that Sadie Hartman, who is Mother Horror online, had through her Nightworms book bundle thing arranged with the publisher to do a cover reveal for the Open Road Media reissue of After the People Lights Have Gone Off. And
she had an exclusive on that. And of course we didn't know that. So we started sharing things around. Now, Sadie's not on Twitter anymore, but she's still very active on Instagram. I think she's on TikTok as well. And she's just been one of the great champions of horror fiction for years. And is just one of the most wonderful people in the horror community. We of course adore her but had no idea that she had an exclusive peek.
Right.
And the publisher already put the book cover out there and Rob happened upon it.
Yeah, total happenstance. And with like no ill intentions, we're just excited fans. And I think that this is the kernel of the whole idea is excited fans.
Yes.
And so we're putting this out and then realizing, oh no, we are kind of messing up this big cover reveal. So we and the people that we knew who had been sharing it agreed to take our posts down, delete our posts so that they can do their proper reveal. And so that was the start of just a constant kind of barrage of new discoveries that came not long after that. So I found People Lights, but then I want to say within a few weeks, maybe between you two, Greg and Jesse, you guys discovered Zombie Bake Off was coming back, and The Long Trial of Nolan Dugatti was coming back, and Three Miles Past was coming back, and Sterling City was coming back, and It Came from Del Rio was coming back. And so what started as, oh, these guys are reissuing after the People Lights have gone off in December, suddenly we're like, they're dropping 5 other books also toward the end of October. And so, like, you want to talk about a bonanza. We thought 2 new releases was going to be a big deal. All of a sudden, we're looking at 6 reissues also happening in
a whole wave of reissues. Yeah.
And so
And,
I feel like
any of these books in print. Sterling City, I don't recall like how expensive it was to go find a copy of that. I feel like maybe that would maybe have still been available through Amazon. But a number of these, especially like It Came from Del Rio and The Long Trial of Nolan Dugatti, like you would easily pay $100 or more for a copy of this book. And I don't know, that was frustrating for Stephen as well, knowing like he wants these books to be available to his readers, but it's just too expensive to get them on the kind of the aftermarket.
Yep. And so now I'm going to pause, and we're going to take a little trip back in time, me and Jesse, because Jesse joined me and Steven to talk about the SST special release of Demon Theory, which is behind me, I think. Right there. The SST Publications special re-release of Demon Theory. It's a limited release. Greg's got it up on the screen. Beautiful right there.
Book.
Gorgeous. And so we had Steven on, and we didn't really talk too much about the actual story. We did talk about the story, but we talked more about just, a lot of stuff, really. And one of the things that came up at some point were some of his older books, and how, I don't even know how the conversation came around to it, but he started talking about how he's been actively working on reacquiring the rights to his out-of-print stuff. And so at the time he said that, my mind left it at, oh, great, Steven's getting his rights back. Maybe one day that will lead to something.
One day being how long later?
Cut to like 8 months later, and we're finding all of these little Easter eggs online. So that was it's very encouraging to know that. So Stephen, being so prolific over the years, he's published, and this was before Mongrel started the momentum and then moving into My Heart is a Chainsaw, he published with a ton of independent publishers, most of which don't exist anymore. And so a lot of his rights and stuff have been just jumbled up in that kind of mess for a long time. And so when me and Jesse talked to him back then, the whole idea that he was actively in the process of acquiring his rights back so that they went back to him was very encouraging. And in my mind, I was like, selfishly, oh, maybe we'll see some of these again. And I just didn't know it was going to be so soon. I would have started like saving money or something. Jesse, as someone who's been in the know for longer, how close to a complete collection of Stephen Graham Jones publications are you?
Are we talking every edition of every book, or are we just talking about, do I have all of the ones that have been officially published?
We'll start there. All the ones that have been officially published.
Are we including lit journals in that?
No, I mean, that's a stretch. Like, okay. Novels, collections.
I have all of the published.
Yeah. Yes. So you got yourself a Dugatti. Yeah. You got yourself an It Came from Del Rio. So here's the thing. Anybody's listening, Jesse had gifted me stuff like States of Grace, which is another one of those ones that is like fiercely sought after and very, very hard to find. Jesse gifted me It Came from Del Rio. Like, he's gifted me copies of some of the hardest to find things, just out of generosity. And I think out of sharing. Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, but like just sharing, that I'm also a fan, and you're like, oh, you need to read this. So all right, let's push that door a little bit farther open. So you've got everything. How deep does this rabbit hole go? Like, uh, uh,
All the way to
for,
Del Rio.
foreign editions, hardcover, paperback, large print. Like what's the extent of your collection approach?
It's fairly deep. I'm missing a handful of editions and whatnot, but it's pretty extensive. Yeah.
Do you ever plan to like share a photo? I think there's like, especially now, there's like so many people who would just love to see like all of that stuff presented together. So I don't know.
I think I've been promising Greg that for 2 years now. It's coming down to the day when I have the space and the money for bookcases once again.
Yeah,
They will then be gloriously shown as they once were.
I'm so thankful I started collecting horror mostly when I started working from home and I had to turn this into what used to be our like arts and craft room into my home office. So I needed to get some shelves and do something with it. So I kind of had the space and the shelf space to dedicate to specific authors who I really, really follow closely. Obviously, that Stephen Graham Jones, right behind me. That's my SGJ collection there. But I had the available space without having to annex the living room next door. But the day's coming. The day's coming. And hey, I wanted to mention something else, Rob. And this is kind of just heading the direction you're going with Jesse's kindness and generosity. He sent me my copy of After the People Lights Have Gone Off. There was no way I was going to find an affordable copy back when before he sent me one, but he sent it to me and I said, like, I was just so thankful to him for being so generous. And he said, it's all about sharing the story. And I thought, man, that's a great way to think. And now I
yeah,
look at people like Amber Roy, for example, who will go and buy multiple copies of Josh Mallerman's newest book. And I know she'll go and like send a book to somebody, or I get an extra copy of the Kelly Link edition, and I don't want money for it. I'll pay for the postage and everything, just to send it to someone because I think they're going to enjoy it and dig it, and it might lead them to their newest favorite author. So folks who buy multiple, especially like some of the really up and coming authors, whose careers maybe haven't taken off the way like Stevens or Josh's have. But like when you go and find someone you really dig, think about buying a two or three copies of their book, if of their books, if it really resonates with you, because that's just such a great way to turn someone else onto an author whose works had a real impact on your life and your reading life. So yeah, I'm real grateful to Jesse for sending me that book. And it's not the only Stephen Graham Jones rare item that he sent me, but that whole idea of, yeah, it's all about sharing the story. What a wonderful way to be a reader. I love that.
yeah. I totally agree, and in that spirit, especially with all of the enthusiasm for Jones that has built throughout this year, I've sent a copy. I've sent three Stephen Graham Jones books to two different people,
Nice.
just out of the whole, because Jesse, they're all from Jesse too, but had sent me more than one copy, not realizing, oh, I already gave you this one. So here I am with multiples now because of
Yeah.
Jesse. And so like, yeah, the idea of like selling them sounds kind of gross. But if there's someone who doesn't have it, who's going to benefit from it, like just love it. Like you said, share the story. And so, yeah, like, that's, it feels good too. Like just to be like, yeah, just take this. So,
Yeah.
um,
And that's the lifeblood of these authors, including like really successful ones as well. Or I think about like Ramsey Campbell, who's been writing for, I think, 60 years now. He's been writing and publishing horror all that time. Um, and it's as successful as he's been, it is up to his readers and his growing and developing readership to keep up the demand to keep his work in print. Um, I don't think anyone, even like Stephen King, I don't think anyone should take for granted that all of their work will remain in print.
Yeah.
So by championing an author and a specific work, to keep those books in print, that keeps that longevity of the writer's legacy going, and makes it more likely that that their work will get a foothold in the next generation of readers. So, reading, this is a bit of a crass term here, but reading is a transaction, or fiction is a transaction, I should say, between the author and the reader. Part of our job as the reader, as a responsible and generous reader, is to keep these works going by recommending them, by sharing a book with somebody, by asking publishers. I think about Valancourt Books. They're out doing great work by bringing notable books by authors who kind of like, maybe they've passed on, they've passed away, and they're posthumously publishing Michael Shea's Polyphemus, for example. Bringing back these classic works that were loved 25, 30 years ago, and they still have so much life in them, they shouldn't be lost. So
Yeah.
us supporting the works of publishers like Valancourt, for example, I think that's really important. Being a great reader is not just about reading and enjoying, but advocating for your authors and your artists.
To that point, so we're at a point in the year where all of a sudden we discover there are 6 books coming out that are reissues of Stephen Graham Jones books. And me and Greg had started talking about it. Me, Greg, and Jesse had started talking about it a little bit, and about how like this is a thing that's happening. And I know that Greg, I think you're the one who originally had the idea to call for an SGJ day, like an actual like day in the calendar as a way to celebrate. And my move was, I'm just gonna call on the phone the publisher and say, hey, what's the ARC situation here? And so those ideas were kind of swirling around simultaneously, but I don't know where the idea to bring the group together came from or who it originated with, but I knew that talking to the publisher and saying, I've got 15 people interested in this that are all influencers was going to carry more weight than, hey, I got a podcast. And I think, Greg, on your side, your thought was there's a lot of people who are really passionate about this who are going to benefit from this. So like the fact that we were all kind of talking together about this, all of a sudden a group was born.
Yeah.
And so that started a ball rolling.
It sure did. It sure did.
What's your memory of how this all kind of came together?
So my recollection is, yeah, I put out when I realized, hey, like these books are going to be dropping on, I think it was originally October 22 from Open Road Media. I'm like there's going to be like 5 books coming out,
Yep.
and then there'll be after the People Lights have gone off, coming out December 4 from Open Road as well. I'm like, this is like an event. This is such a big deal that we ought to all just celebrate it. Everyone who reads Stephen Graham Jones ought to celebrate it like a national holiday, like SGJ Day. Which I had played around with that term previously, and thinking, wouldn't it be great if like we all met in Idaho at some like mountain little town in the mountains around a lake or something, and just to celebrate all the work that he's done, and maybe with
no, that wouldn't be great. That would be a slasher movie.
Well, oh no, you're right. We probably would all end up dead. You're right. But I thought, SGJ. That's what I would have called it. SGJ Day would have been the mountain retreat, and then it would only be celebrated one time, I guess. But when I started playing around with that SGJ Day idea and just posted about it, and some people kind of picked it up and shared it or whatever, Amber Roy reached out to me and said if there was something that she could do to help with helping kind of proliferate this. And Rob, you reached out as well, or we had some communication about that. And I started playing around with the idea of not just like having that day, but like building up a little merch around it. So we made these little SGJ Day buttons, this little 3-button set with a couple of artists, Justin McElroy and Jason Augusta, and got Steve, of course, got Steven's blessing. But it was all about hashtag SGJ Day, October. Originally October 22, the publisher moved the date up to October 1, so we actually had to shift some of our plans around. But the little buttons read hashtag SGJ Day OCT 1, and we shipped out, I think, maybe 50, 55 sets of these buttons. And Amber was really very instrumental in getting all of that done. But Amber and I had come together about the logistics of SGJ Day. Rob, you reached out to the publisher, and then as we realized, hey, like, we know a lot of people who are passionate about it. The SGJ Club on Instagram, that Tony Petro, Matt Morris, and Kat Delani are instrumental in really leading that, and a number of other influencers, Lauren and Marguerite, and Anna and Heather Jane, and Anna Dupree, so many people who we know from socials who are really passionate about Stephen's work. So we kind of convened an email thread, got an email thread spun up. And Rob, you called us the beautiful sinners after his book, All the Beautiful Sinners. That stuck, and that ended up going into like media and stuff. So I think people really responded well to that. But as soon as we started saying, hey, would you guys be interested in helping us just promote this first wave of reissues of his long sought out of print work? And everyone was like, oh, absolutely. And we kind of built a little bit of a movement out of that.
Which we'll talk more about the impact of that movement later on. But so from my side of it, I emailed Open Road Media, did not hear back. And I saw there was a phone number, and I was like, fuck it. I've never called a publisher before, so like, why not? I called and I left a voicemail. And in the voicemail, I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was something to the effect of, I do a podcast. You got all these books coming out from Stephen Graham Jones. We got a thing going on called SGJ Day. I got like a dozen people that are already promoting the fact that these books are coming out. And I need you guys to tell me what you can do as far as like advanced copies of the books and stuff like that. And to my surprise, they called me back and left a voicemail. We did a little phone tag. And finally, I got on the phone with two of the folks from Open Road, and they're like, we fucking love this. Maybe they didn't swear. I don't remember. But they're like, we love this. Let's figure this out. And so I gathered a bunch of, I gave them a list of who's involved and what they do and stuff like that. And they gave us advanced ebooks of all of the books ahead of time. And so we had, visuals now that we can start sharing on social media and everything. And so I think they love us. I think they like the fact that we all got together to do this. But like, again, it's in the spirit of, like you said before, Greg, sharing our love for something, promoting this artist that, means a lot to us. And so we get these advanced copies, and SGJ Day was pretty damn big, if you ask me. I don't know if I have a comprehensive list of stuff, but I know that there was a Fangoria article about it.
Yep.
There was an article in Publishers Weekly. Mm-hmm. And then there's I think it's a blog called Shelf Awareness also did a post about it. How do you guys feel about being mentioned in Fangoria?
I mean, that's pretty awesome. And it was online. It was on their website. It wasn't in the print magazine. I'm a subscriber. Love Fangoria. Love the brand. Love the leadership. I'm on like their Facebook community calls with a bunch of other subscribers. So I'm pretty bought into Fangoria. And just to have my name show up there along with my friends is really, really awesome. So I was very, very grateful to him to do that. And yeah, if you're not a subscriber to Fangoria, Stephen has a regular column in there for the last maybe eight or nine issues called Slasher Nation. So he's a a mainstay of the magazine as well. But yeah, being able to see my name show up on their website in an article by Fango was pretty awesome.
Any thoughts, Jesse?
I'm just like, yeah, man, I finally made it.
So, yeah, SG Day comes, and we raise a bunch of awareness. We have a lot of fun. I originally had planned on doing this episode to post around that time, and then just a lot of stuff pushed that out so that I couldn't. But there's book club stuff planned around that. There was the buttons, everybody doing social media stuff. The hashtag SGJ Day was everywhere. And then obviously the other thing I thought was cute was Greg encouraged people to eat at Chipotle or Whataburger as a way to celebrate Stephen Graham Jones, as those being like noted Stephen Graham Jones food establishments to eat at. It was a lot of fun. I think it was a lot of fun. Are we doing the same day next year? Is it officially October 1st every year?
Absolutely.
We should, if we can, yeah. If something gets published anywhere around October 1, that's awesome. That's great. But I don't think we have to necessarily stick with that. But by the way, I will also say not only is October 1 was the drop date of several reissued formerly out of print books, but it was also this year approximately the 30th anniversary of his first published story, The Parrot Man, in the Mind Purge literary journal that was produced in the fall winter 94-95 time frame out of University of North Texas, in that area. So in a way, I don't know the exact date on which that literary journal was published, but it was around this time frame. So I think it's legitimate to say that SGJ Day this year was also celebrating 30 years of fiction from Stephen. So it made a lot of, and that's definitely a lot of the spotlight of my posts were these reissues, these very welcome reissues, as well as just saying, man, he's been at it for 30 years, and he's one of the most prolific writers. Now he's really taken his profile has certainly taken much higher standing since his novel The Only Good Indians became a New York Times bestseller about 3 years ago. But still, he's been really working in the industry for 30 years now, and that to me was worth celebrating. So next year, next SGJ Day, I guess it'll be 31 years.
One thing that happened on SGJ Day was that you were in Texas, Greg, visiting. It's Texas Tech, right?
That's right.
And before I want to start my question about this by asking a very funny thing. So you went down there to visit that college in order to view the collected papers of Stephen Graham Jones. And I'm going to pose the question. I'm going to open up you talking about that by posing the question: how many times was Jesse mentioned in all the papers that you looked through?
Yeah, that's a great question. Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas. It's a large university. It is where Stephen Graham Jones did his undergraduate in the early '90s. And he, as an undergrad, I think that was really his connection to the Special Collections Library. Specifically, it's the Sowell Collection. They made arrangements with him at some point in the last few years to keep his collected papers there. And his papers consist of, right now, about 35 boxes of current drafts of novels, early drafts of novels, like My Heart is a Chainsaw was originally called Lake Access Only. And Jay Daniels was a rather minor figure in there, just one of the people there. She wasn't the main character. She I think she, as a character, demanded the spotlight as she evolved, and as some of Stephen's early readers kind of got back to him and said, "Who is this Jay Daniels? Like, she's really interesting." And he got the message, "Hey, like, let's develop her more," and she became this final girl heroine protagonist. Um, but there the boxes contain novel manuscripts, current drafts, early drafts, screenplays that he wrote based on his novels. Screenplays he wrote based on, I found one based on a William Faulkner short story called Red Leaves. Notes, journal upon journal of notes, some of them from dating back from college, maybe even some high school stuff. I found the outline of a story or a novel, I'm not sure which yet, on a napkin from Fur's cafeteria in Lubbock. The napkin was shredded and sealed in a Tupperware container. So I pulled it out and reassembled it to try, like ancient papyrus, reassembled it to try to read it and get a photograph of it. So there were, and just like the journal notes were on, so napkins, of course, in like college spiral bound notebooks, little tiny memo pads, hotel stationery. I found it on. He had an entire envelope of checkbook registers where he had written notes on just throughout it. I mean, just like anything that was at hand. Oh, I found notes like when he goes to some kind of to speak on a panel at a convention. He's going to have that little tent card that sits up there. It says Stephen Graham Jones. On the backside, I would see notes to a story. So it basically notes on anything, and it was just like journal upon journal upon journal. That's where, with Stephen's permission and the Sowell collection's permission, I photographed a lot of stuff. I took 4,200 photographs of his work that was in the collection, for the purpose of digitizing it so it's available to Stephen to look back on, and also it's a digital copy for the Sowell collection. So my exploration was in part to benefit Stephen and the collection, in large part for that. But I took pictures of so much stuff, but the journals were kind of overwhelming. There was so much I did not get to on this trip, and I was there for the course of 5 days. I spent 30 hours in the collection. Almost the entire time was, what's in this box? Pull out a folder. Pull out, a novel that's not been published. There were 6 of them in the collection. Put it down, take a photo of the first page, pull it out. And I just had a kind of a rig, sort of like my mic stand here was a lot like this, with a camera holder, a little fob in my hand where I could snap the picture remotely, grab up the sheet, snap the next one, grab the sheet, and then keep everything in really careful order and make sure that none of the pages were damaged by working with them. So, we're in a for real archive of papers that there's no replacement for them anywhere in some cases. In a lot of cases. So it was really exciting. I dig that stuff. I'm a nerd. I dig that stuff. I love archives. I love the promise of what you could find. And I know I found, like 6 unpublished novels, probably 10 unpublished stories. I found screenplays. I found a lot of copies of like early versions of Demon Theory, for example, where his early readers had gone on and made notes. Certainly Jesse's name did show up there. In fact, I hope it's okay for me to share this. There was a screenplay adaptation of one of Stephen's books that said by Jesse on it, penciled in at the top, that Jesse had written. Jesse, I think that was The Least of My Scars, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it didn't. It was just simply missing a title page. It just jumped right into William Colton Hughes, some kind of monologue with him. But Jesse's name was penciled on at the top. And I saw other names frequently. Ito Roma or Romo, I forget.
Romo.
Romo, yeah. Is it Romo Ito or Ito Romo?
Ito Romo.
Ito Romo, who I think must have been an early reader of his for many years, because his name showed up a lot. There were 2 or 3 names you would see quite a bit. So yeah, it was exciting. I love this stuff. It's very exciting to me. I've got a lot of work to do to like organize and take the photos, crop them, and then put them into PDFs, and hopefully even like some optical character recognition to make them like searchable documents. But yeah, that's a part of my joie de vivre as an empty nester. I get to go out and look in archives and do fun work like that.
Greg, I know that the question I'm about to ask, your answer is going to be for the sake of archiving and for keeping the record and for to benefit everybody. Blah 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 blah. We fucking know that. Selfishly, what was your favorite part of being able to see all that stuff?
Well, I mean, selfishly, I want to be able to read all of these things. The thought of finding an unpublished, and yes, that's probably going to mean early, like a college era story that's never seen the light of day publicly. Yeah, I mean that's really exciting to have that kind of make that kind of a find, or to maybe pull up images from story notes that Stephen will look back on years after he first wrote them, and it's still a legitimate idea that for some reason captured him in his 20s and might still capture him now in his early 50s. By the way, in a folder that was dated 2004, I found he scribbled down the word parthenogenesis, which like the day after
No.
that, a story he wrote called Parthenogenesis was published, I think on Tor.com or
Sure.
Reactor magazine published that. So there are ideas and words, phrases, images that he does have at least a little bit of sketching in some of his work. But yeah, the ideas, the words, the phrases kind of get sink into a subconscious and maybe stay there for decades. In this case, 20 years later, the word parthenogenesis appears as the title of one of his stories. So, kind of making those connections, being able to document that and serve that up in a way that Stephen might actually find useful for a future story is certainly exciting. But the thing that was most fun to discover was going through his notebooks, especially in college, and seeing like the stories of betrayal and ghastly, horrific murders and slashers were a big deal to him. Of course, early on, he
Yeah.
as he's told in story after story, he was watching slashers as a teenager growing up in the 80s. But then going through his notes and seeing his ruminations on all these ideas and murder and stuff, and then seeing a love note from his girlfriend Nancy, who has been his wife for the better part of 30 years now, just saying, "I love you so much, Stephen Graham Jones," that kind of thing was
Yeah.
really quite adorable. And or to see, whatever there, I would occasionally find a love note dropped into his journals every once in a while. So that was really sweet.
It also occurred to me that while you're doing this and everything, you're discovering a lot of things. And then I asked myself, what would happen if Jesse was there as a sort of like historical like knowledge base to reference against? So like you're like, hey Jesse, what is this? I'm not fully understanding. And Jesse's like, oh, this is this. Like I feel like you should have had Jesse in your suitcase on the way down there because just of like the breadth of his knowledge over the years of just being engaged with Stephen,
Well,
probably.
a perfect example of that is a story by one title would later be published under another title. And I have not read every single story that he's ever published, or I wouldn't remember some of it. I'd like maybe recognize a name of a character or something, but I wouldn't know all of that. So, and Stephen actually, he expressed that he wished he could have been at Texas Tech with me at the Salvo Collection, but he was at the Western Literature Conference, I believe it's called, that week. So he wasn't able to be there. And I know like some of Jesse's background, just his familiarity with Stephen's work from early on would have come in handy. And we kind of kicked around the idea like a year or more ago of me and Jesse kind of, and maybe Andrea L. Rogers as well, like trying to do some sort of a divide and conquer on the boxes. But I went it alone. I was able to look at every single box. and also an old compact laptop that he had from the
Nice.
90s, to see if there was anything else on it that had not been pulled off and sent to me by the special collections library. But I certainly didn't scan everything in every box. There's probably another 5 days worth of work to do, especially around the journals. In which case, like some of them are like the little notepads are the width of maybe an inch and a half to 2 inches. Like you really having to work through small pieces of paper or paper where I think he had like a paper bag that he had written on the back of. Anyway, there's some of these things will really take more time to get down, but I did at least look in every box to see what could be found. I found there was a box of yearbooks from elementary,
Cool.
middle school, high school, where you could find photos of him as a child, and he doesn't have a lot of pictures of himself as a child. So that was kind of special to see those, and I did my best to get a good quality photo from those yearbooks. There's one cool one of him playing basketball as a high school junior, I think. He's all lined up, looking real serious, about to shoot the ball, trying to shoot that hoop. So that was kind of cool to see him kind of trace his childhood just a little bit.
Very cool. Well, maybe that's SGJ Day 2025. The dream team, Jesse and Greg, go back down to Texas and get more work done.
There's
That'd be
definitely
wild.
more work. Definitely more work to do.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Oh, and I'll also mention real quick. There are, at least 2 novels that there's a printed copy of the manuscript for, at least 2 forthcoming novels that haven't been published yet, but they're on the slate. I think we'll talk about them in a little bit as well.
Right on. Very cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, like from where we started this conversation to now, like we started our year 2024, it's 2024, right? Yeah. Okay. Just panicked for a second. I didn't know what year it was. Just babies, not understanding what was going on in the world. And then suddenly there's just this flood of Stephen Graham Jones stuff. And it's very cool and very exciting. We get swept up in this movement. We create a movement that we get swept up in. Let's just be clear. We created a movement that we got swept up in. And it had kind of more of an effect than maybe we expected because, Greg, we've known each other for a while now, and we started doing podcast episodes earlier in the year. But really, like SGJ Day as a concept was the first time I think we really did a project together.
Yeah, that's right.
But I feel like we worked well together, and so cut to very recently, I'm moving us along to Scare Up the Vote.
Yes.
So I just put on my website, I posted about Scare Up the Vote. So if you want to hear the story of how I got involved, I wrote a story about it there. But essentially, Becky Spratford, longtime friend, was talking to Cynthia Pelayo, and Cynthia Pelayo said, "Hey, we need someone to do tech for this thing. Who do you know?" And Becky said, "Oh, talk to Rob." Becky texts me and says, "Hey, can you do this thing?" And I was like, "I don't know how to do that, but yes." And so she's like, "All right, I'm going to set up a call with Tanana Reeve Dew." So Tanana Reeve Dew had posted on Twitter, like, Crime is doing a stream for Harris Walls, and these geeks are doing a stream for Harris Walls. Where's the horror stream? And then she's like, "I guess I'm doing it." And so she pulled together her, Cynthia Pelayo, Christopher Golden, Maxwell Ian Gold, and Linda Addison are the 5 kind of main original folks who were like, "All right, we've got a committee. We can make this thing happen." And then they're like, "We need someone to do tech." And that's where I came in. She pitched me the idea. I was like, "I'm very enthusiastic about this. I haven't done this specifically, but I've done a lot of the individual components." Blah, blah, blah. Lots of, panicked, last minute, trying to figure out how to make this happen because it's a big event being done on a very small timeline. At some point I said, "Hey, Greg, you do a lot of stuff. Can we set up a call sometime and talk about this Scare Up the Vote thing?" because I knew that you would just be a good resource for helping me figure things out. And we get on the call, and within like 90 seconds, Greg, you're talking as if like you're all in to participate and spend your time and work on this together. And I was like, oh, I was expecting this guy to be generous and share advice with me, and now he's a valued part of the team. And there was so much relief. We talked for like, I think, an hour and a half or something like that. And I was so relieved at the end of the call that I had another person that was going to help do this. And so we can talk deeper about the stream and our working together and all the behind the scenes stuff. But it's funny because at one point I was on a call. I think, Greg, we were both on a call, and you had casually mentioned that we did the SGJ Day thing together.
Yeah. To Tananarive do.
Yeah.
Yes.
To Tananarive do. And she's like, you guys did that? That was everywhere. And then subsequent to that, in future calls, she was talking about us like, these are the guys that did SGJ Day. And so that's why I wanted to bring it up, is because like that gave us a reputation we didn't know about.
But then I mean, we can see people posting about SGJ Day, something that we kind of came up with and started promoting. But or like, wow, how exciting! It's like showing up in Publishers Weekly and Fangoria and getting some kind of media coverage in a sense, and yet getting a good sense of how deep was the impact of us wanting to promote a favorite author. Well, it got the attention of an award-winning author, Tananarive Due, and if you're not familiar with her work, her novel The Reformatory won the World Fantasy Award for Best Novel like yesterday or day before.
Yeah.
So I think on Saturday night it did. So she's not just a novelist and short story writer. She's a screenwriter along with her husband Stephen Barnes. I think they live in L.A. And anyway, she's a not just a well-known horror author. She's just highly respected. And to know that like she was aware of this SGJ Day thing that us some fans came up with. Yeah, that was kind of a thrill to know that it had gotten the attention of some fellow authors, and she's like, how do I get that kind of attention for my work? So that was I got tickled by that.
Right. And so yeah, you said it exactly right. Like, it's nice to see that people were talking about it and like it got press coverage and stuff, but like when you hear other people say, oh yeah, how do I get, or whatever, then you know that it actually had like a pretty big impact. And so like, yeah, we being able to, I think that became like a shorthand for like, these guys know what they're doing for this project. Like it bought trust, and it bought like, a level of like confidence that we were going to be able to pull this off. And so, that thing that started as like, oh, we're fans that we're just going to be babbling about this anyway, why don't we do it collectively, turned into like kind of like a resume builder of an experience where we got to work on that stream, the Scare Up the Vote stream. And I'm just gonna just sound like a little bit egotistical right now. That went so well from a technical perspective. It was essentially flawless.
It went, the Scare Up the Vote event went really well. And honestly, Rob, I don't know why when we got on that first call and you came to ask me just for some, for me to share a little bit of my experience doing webcasting. I have a little podcast called Cathonica that I do. I'm just like 8-9 episodes. I do that on occasion when I can interview an author who I really love. I run the webcast. Good. Yeah, thank you so much. And I've just I've gotten to talk with Stephen Graham Jones and Laird Barron and Kelly Lincoln and just Paul Tremblay and John Langan and these Ellen Datlow, these just Laird wonderful Barron. Authors and fellow horror community members. I run the webcast at my church. I help with that a couple times a month. I've been around the technology for a long time, so I produce theater for 8 or 9 years, just kind of on the side. So the whole thing with bringing a team together, understanding what roles are involved, and knowing just from a technical standpoint what has to happen and some pitfalls that you want to avoid. I kind of had a sense of what to do. I didn't know you were just coming to ask me for kind of my perspective on things. I thought you were asking me if I could help, and I have a habit of inveigling myself into situations that look really interesting anyway. So I just kind of assumed that you needed or wanted me on the team. That was presumptuous of me, but we make a great team, dude. It was so much fun. And the thing that SGJ Day I think showed, like someone like Tananarive, is, oh, here's a group of kind of mature, responsible people who can create something that's positive, maintain its positive nature, and in the end produce something good. But this was more than just, coordinating a bunch of posts on a certain day. There's a lot that goes into a webcast, and especially when you have the number of guests that we had, which were about 25 people, 25 guests, doing a webcast on StreamYard that would push to YouTube Live, and from there would be broadcast out. And it's on a political subject, and
Yep.
specifically the presidential election of 2024. I don't know that anything has been that politically divisive that has been this politically divisive in a long time. So there's the potential that bad actors will try to kind of push their way into the process to disrupt it, or will get on and start trying to be extremely negative in the YouTube Live chat comments and things like that. So we assembled. It was really kind of from the technological standpoint, the webcast standpoint. Rob and I really led the assembling of this team. Fortunately, Tananarive had a handful of other volunteers already say we want to help with the webcast. And some of those volunteers everyone was awesome. There were also a couple who had real serious webcast chops because they were doing webcasts constantly. Seasoned, experienced people. Karima and Charisse in particular were two I would name there, who were MVP level, really, really brought great levels of value to the process. But we all together were just, we defined not just the technology needed, but the process for us all to work together in about 5 days to a broadcast that would include some real high level guests. I'll let you share the guest list because it was pretty amazing.
So yeah, and I'm going to take it back to when I first heard about this. Becky Spradford texted me, "Can you talk? It's big." And I immediately panicked, and I was like, "Is she like trapped under a car?" And so I call her back, and she's like, "No, Tananarive is doing this thing, and like she's already got a bunch of big names going on. Like she's like, I can't say who, but like big names." But then I'm talking to Tananarive, and like she's and then by then kind of had announced the initial guest list and everything. Stephen King, Joe Hill, Mike Flanagan was in it, Bryan Fuller, which by the way, I got a Bryan Fuller thing.
Scott Derrickson, my favorite filmmaker working today, Scott Derrickson, love his work. Along with Mike Flanagan came his wife, Kate Siegel, who is, of course, well known as an actor, but also now as a director. She directed one of the segments of VHS Beyond.
Paul Tremblay, Josh Malerman, Stephen Graham Jones.
Was there. Alma Katsu, who's not only a horror and espionage author, but she worked in national intelligence. Her career's in national intelligence 30 or maybe 40 years. Keith Rosen, Keith Rossen was in there. I mean, just so many incredible. Don Mancini, who created Chucky, was in there. The woman
who did the Megan movie, whose name is
Akela Cooper, who wrote Megan, and Malignant. Also, she wrote Malignant. That's a blast.
David Desmalchian, right? Did I say his name?
David Desmalchian, a grown-up monster kid who's just so much fun. A well loved actor who had just won best lead performance in a horror movie in the Fangoria Chainsaw
Yeah,
Awards, like the day before we
for like
broadcast, a day or two
Leonardo
before we
Del, yeah.
broadcast. So yeah, an incredible list of authors, horror writers, and horror filmmakers who were there.
Yeah.
And of course, yes, having Stephen King and Joe Hill there was a huge part of this.
Stephen Graham Jones kicked it off though, which was
He was
great.
he was our top. It came right at the top there. Yep.
And he used, so the Jay Daniels is my final girl that was wearing that shirt, which if for anybody who's listening who doesn't know, Greg is the person who conceived of and vends these shirts. Jay Daniels is my final girl. So Steven's wearing that shirt, and he said, Jay Daniels may be my final girl, but Kamala Harris is my president. And I mean, I'm sure that all the Stephen Graham Jones fans were like just geeked out about that because that was a smooth kind of way to end his conversation. I like the fact that he was like, "You may know me from," and he's like bringing up all these books, and he's like, "Or you may work at the urgent care and think I'm there too often."
That was awesome.
By the way, Jesse, I got a text message from you during the stream when not long after Stephen was up, and what was your observation about Stephen's appearance?
I think I texted you. I'm pretty sure he held up a finished copy of Buffalo Hunter x Hunter.
Absolutely, yeah. So that did not escape me in the moment too. I'm watching him hold these up, and I was like, "That's not an arc. That's not an arc at all." So yeah, that's pretty cool. So I'll tell my quick Bryan Fuller thing. So Bryan Fuller was the person I was like the most fanboying about in this whole lineup of all the people we just listed. So judge me how you will. But I'm such a fan of the TV show Hannibal, and the fact that Bryan Fuller was going to be occupying the same virtual space as me was just I was over the moon. It's so great. And he starts out his thing by saying, I want to say something to former President Donald Trump. Keep my murder husband's name out of your motherfucking mouth. That's how he started it out. And for anybody who's a Hannibal fan, that is like, I can't imagine something that he could have said that would have made a Hannibal fan more excited than that specific thing. Jesse, am I on the right track with that?
Oh yeah, definitely.
I have a murder husband's shirt that I really should have worn for this. I didn't think about that. So he said that, and Greg, I don't know if you noticed, but like I was just I do have that clock is no one's ever asked me about that, but Jesse, you gave me this clock, right?
Yeah, I think all the you, me, and Misty. I think we all got one.
Yeah. So this clock is from anybody who's listening to the audio is like, what the hell he's talking about? If you look at the video, I'm pointing to a clock on my wall that's behind me, and that's a reference to an episode of Hannibal where they ask him to draw a clock, and he draws it all fucked up because he doesn't know it yet, but something's going on in his brain that makes his perception all weird. So it's not only is it the Hannibal clock with the weird drawing of the clock, but it's set to the time that he says it is when he draws it. So I don't have it. It's not a running clock. I took the batteries out and I set it to the time that he mentioned in the episode. So that's how big of a nerd I am. Bryan Fuller does this thing. I was so excited about that line that once the stream was over, later that night, I brought up the YouTube. How did I do it? What did I do? I grabbed the clip of that moment where he said that, and I made it a reel on Instagram. And of course I tagged Bryan Fuller in it, and it's hashtags whatever, like you would. And like within an hour, not only had Bryan Fuller shared it to his stories, Bryan Fuller followed me on Instagram, and so now Bryan Fuller is following me on Instagram, and that reel has gotten almost 10,000 views and like hundreds and hundreds of likes. It's the most popular social media thing I've ever done, I think.
Nice.
And so that was a very gratifying moment for me where like doing the stream itself had that there was a gratifying just like knowing that we participated in this thing. But the selfish thing was this fucking idol of mine. Like I was in his mind for a moment, and he shared a thing, and so that was a really cool. I can't tell you how cool that was.
That is really cool. My kind of selfish thing out of this was Amber, Roy, and I ran. Amber was host of the Green Room on a Zoom call where all of our guests would join and our hosts would join. Those five, people who started this event, as you mentioned, were in the Green Room there and just talking with folks. But Amber and I was kind of a lurker in that space. I helped migrate our guests between the Green Room and the StreamYard webcast studio. And then Rob would put people up on stage and take them down off stage when they were done talking. Um, but Stephen King and Joe Hill were the first people to pop into the Zoom room like a couple hours before they were supposed to go on. They were testing their technology, and then they went off camera and on mute, and while they waited, for their time to get a little bit closer. But I did get to chat with Stephen and Joe just a little bit, and it was just very endearing to see Stephen King and his son Joe Hill interacting. It was just, such a lovely father son kind of relationship. I just chatted with him just a little bit personally. We were there not to gush over these horror creators, but to just assist with the process and create a warm, welcoming environment. But they were just so fun and gentlemanly, and just seeing them interact with each other as Joe was trying to help Stephen figure out the best technology to use to actually get on the webcast itself. It was quite endearing.
The sum of my interaction was when they actually showed up on the stream platform that we were using.
Because you were in the webcast studio the entire time, so yeah, you had did the lion's share of the work there.
I got to say Stephen and Joe welcome, and they said thanks. So
yes.
Gabino Iglesias was part of the thing too, and I love Gabino, and so I feel pretty bad that I didn't mention him among the original list. But Gabino was there, and he was fantastic as well. Gabino's just. We could just talk about Gabino all day, but I did not want to leave him out. So that was the scare up the vote. And so since we're talking about it, I'll just talk numbers really quick. That stream hit, it peaked in the, somewhere in the 1300s of viewers. And then it was a pretty consistent number of viewers all the time. So I was happy to see that. And so on the night of, we had gotten above $21,000 through our unique donation link, and now it's pretty close to 22. So it's kind of still taken some donations since then, but we didn't really know what to expect. But I'll take that as a win. Like, I think that was a big win. That whole thing was a big win. And like, Greg, I don't know what you talked about yet, but like, I've had people contact me since saying, "Hey, can we do some stuff?" So.
Oh wow, crazy!
Yeah,
it was again like coming up with the technology and a process and and people to fill the necessary roles and to make sure that we all could work together. And some of us in using technology we had not used before, or making sure we could just migrate our guests from a green room on one platform to the studio on another platform, trying to make all that happen in about 5 days. Was, I think, a feat, and I'm very, very happy with how smoothly it went. The technology, there were a couple trouble spots with some of our guests and the audio video setup they had, and Karima went in and worked with them offline to make sure that they were all set, and it ended up working really well. Everything sounded great. It looked really good. Our hosts did a great job, and Tananarive in particular, kicking it all off with a story about her mom, Patricia Stevens Dew. I hope I'm getting her name right. Who was a civil rights activist in the '60s. She shared a black and white photo of her mom as a college student, kind of getting dragged around by the police. Shared a story about her mom getting tear gassed in the face by the police trying to tamp down a peaceful, nonviolent protest. that left marks on her mom for the rest of her life. Her mom had to wear dark glasses for the most part for the rest of her life because of her light sensitivities due to being tear gassed. And in kicking that off, of course, I think really the center of this was Tananarive uh, uh, being able to, with her credibility and just what a great reputation she has, draw from both the literary community and the cinematic horror communities, and bring in some really big names. It's because they trusted her, and we're all on board with this particular political mission, which is to keep Trump out of the White House in 2024. Which I don't like getting real political, but I'm certainly on board with that mission. I think it's a great idea.
Um, Couple of quick notes, and then we'll move away from the stream. You can watch it if you just go on YouTube and search for "Scare Up the Vote." The entire 2 hour, 47-minute stream is available to watch, and not everybody just talked about politics. There was like people talking about David Zasmalshin. I didn't realize he was such a comic book author. Like I'm infinitely way more fascinated by that dude than before. So like, and then Alma Katsu was an intelligence analyst for decades, and so her perspective on the whole impact of all this politics from like just a keeping a country together perspective was cool. Everybody had really fascinating stuff to say. You can find new lipstick colors at one point. Um, so go watch it if you want to. I think it's entertaining. I think it's worthwhile to watch. But two things we've now talked about, SGJ Day and Scare Up the Vote, I think demonstrate something very simple that maybe people don't think about very often, and that is just do the thing. Like if there's something that you care about, if there's something that you are passionate about, do something about it. So no one said, hey, we gotta, we gotta Stephen Graham Jones. We just were passionate and decided to collaborate to kind of amplify our voice. Scare Up the Vote, Tananarive had never done a political streaming event before, but she just cared enough about the idea of like, what am I doing to contribute, that that idea turned into action. And so like, if there's something that you care about, if there's something that matters to you, do something about it. You don't have to be the expert. You don't have to be the biggest name in the room. You can just start and just do it. I don't know. I don't really have much to go beyond that. I think that's the message.
Yeah. Advocate for the art and the artists that you love. I see people. Amber Roy is one. She's certainly not the only person who will go and buy like five Kindle codes for a particular author's new book. With Amber, it's often Josh Mallerman because she's a big Josh Mallerman fan, and she'll
Yep.
just post out there, "Hey, whoever wants to read his new book, Incidents Around the House, I've got five Kindle codes for you. First come, first serve. Just ask for it, and I'll give you the code." She's gone and bought five copies of this book on Kindle. She just wants to share it with people. Like that's serious advocacy. It's You may not think it like scales really well. Well, it's just five codes. No, like that's a big deal when someone cares enough not just to recommend an author or a specific work by an author, but actually buy copies and then just give them to anyone. Some people she won't know who they might see this post and say, "Sure, I'll take a free book. I'd like to check it out." That kind of personal recommendation is a big deal. That's a small act of advocacy for an artist that I think has the potential to make a deep impact on someone. Someone may find their favorite author and then go and buy everything that author has written. Go and read it, buy it, and read it.
Mm-hmm.
Those seemingly small acts are part of what makes the horror community as rich as it is. Not all communities are as welcoming and open friendly as the horror community. I think in part that's because, as Miguel Rodriguez said, horror is and he's coming from the perspective mostly of film. I think it applies to both film and literature, poetry, fiction, novels, etc., comic books. But horror is an empathy building tool. And I think you see the truth of that in that the horror community least in the circles I run in, for the most part, it's really awesome. So yeah,
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing I'll say is don't think that anything that you do does isn't going to make a difference in your life. And there's some examples I'll give you of what I mean by that. Jesse, as a fan of some authors, joined a website called The Velvet back in the day. Had Jesse never done that, he wouldn't be one of the best friends I've ever had in my life. Like, I decided to start a podcast because me and a friend really like talking about books. Had I not done that, never would have met Jesse. Greg one day on Twitter said, "Hey guys, tell me some, this Stephen Graham Jones guy. I'm looking for recommendations of like some of his best stories or whatever that tweet was." Had Greg not done that, we wouldn't be talking right now. So the small things that you do to engage your passions, you have no clue what type of impact that's going to have on your life. It has completely defined who I am. The fact that I decided to share my love of books and reading and everything beyond just the room I'm reading in. And so that's a start. And from there, you can go to the bigger thing and the bigger thing and the bigger thing. And who knows, someday you're going to be a tiny little thumbnail on a virtual screen with Stephen King. So don't get in your own way. Just do the thing that gives you happiness, I think is kind of like my message from all of this.
yeah. Share your joy, share your glee. Oh my goodness, I'm constantly out on socials saying, sharing how excited I am for, hey, a new story by Stephen Graham Jones is coming out on this day, or by Laird Barron, or Nathan Ballingrud, or Kelly Link, or Olivia Llewellyn, or Gemma Files, or Paul, or John, or so many different authors whose work I love, or the new Scott Derrickson film is coming out, or the new I saw Smile 2 over the weekend, just blown away by it, and I just love sharing that. And I'm kind of like member of the Glee Club, probably seem a little loquacious at to say
No.
at the very least come across loquacious to people, but I don't know, it's part of what helps create a wonderful community. And like the whole reason I did the t-shirts and like help run the Laird Barron subreddit is because I want to enrich the reading experience, make it fun, let people see that it's fun. Like you can like reading is not just for squares. It's for people who enjoy a rich emotional and intellectual experience, and then we love to get on socials or in rooms together and talk about it.
Yeah. All right, Jesse, you have any massive uplifting message to tack onto that?
I honestly don't think I could say it any better than you two just did. I mean, honestly, just spread the joy, spread the love.
Well,
The world needs all of those things it can get.
Yep.
You gave Greg that original quote about share the story or whatever.
It's all about sharing the story, is what Jesse said. And I keep thinking about that. I really like that a lot.
So, in the spirit of that, really the only thing that we haven't talked about so far, because we're pretty much up to the present day of 2024, is what's coming in the future. So I didn't really think too much, but I don't think Steven's got anything on the. But all right, back up. You mentioned that he's got the column in Fangoria. I did not go into his comic book releases or anything like that. So if either of you want to talk briefly about any of that,
the True Believers is still going strong. I believe it's going to end up being a 3-issue comic book, and it's all happening through Kickstarter. So each issue gets its own individual Kickstarter, and the second one has already started shipping. People have been receiving, their comic books, their masks, their buttons, their stickers, all that other stuff, their soundtrack. So anyone who has an interest in that and feels like they missed out, keep an eye on Kickstarter for True Believers, because if they follow the pattern they established with, which is weird saying a pattern out of 3, but the second time around you had the option to still get issue 1
cool
from them as add-ons to the Kickstarter. So yes, when the third one comes around, any day now, I wouldn't be surprised if waiting to launch page was available for you to sign up for alerts. So yeah, keep an eye on it.
There's
Awesome.
a issue 2 just came in. It does come with a sticker here of Killer, KILLRTM, and also a guitar pick, because there's a musician who's part of this
Nice.
issue, I believe. I guess cameos by Jamie Lee Curtis, and I think Devin Sawa is in one of the issues,
And on the cover
other,
too.
yeah, that's right.
Nice. And
Aguar
then
apparently is in issue 2 as well. So yeah,
Earth Divers as well.
Yes,
Earth Divers.
the third volume hits in December for trade paperback.
Very cool. So there is stuff still coming this year. So that's if the stuff that has and after the People Lights have gone off comes out December 2nd or 4th. So December 4th is still not happening.
As does the print edition of Sterling City.
Nice. Very cool. And then
And I have heard it has not been made. It has not been confirmed publicly, so don't quote me on it. But also, it came from Del Rio. We should have that in print on December 4 as well. I believe that'll be print on demand along with Sterling City. So you may not see it in bookstore shelves, but you should be able to order it. Yes, through Amazon, but go support your local independent bookstore. Go ask them to order it. Again, like the print copy of Sterling City, I think you can now order that probably from most any independent bookstore. The print copies of It Came from Del Rio, I don't believe those are pre-orderable now, but I'd say over the next probably 3-4 weeks, we just go and look for that. Go to your indie bookstore's website, see if it's on their catalog. Bookshop.org is another good way to find it and be able to order it through your local indie bookstore.
2025. I had gotten so used to Steven having a book out a year and then a couple of other random projects, a short story in this or whatever, that I'm not going to say that I'm going to get Stephen Graham Jones fatigue because
it's not possible.
Yeah. But 2025 is already shaping up to be a pretty significant release year. So I gathered together a list of stuff that is confirmed and unconfirmed. And so far, as far as actual novels or those types of things go, March 18th, I think, is the first thing with the Buffalo Hunter. So that's the big, I think, the marquee novel of, oh no, hang on. Pause. Before that, the paperback release of The Angel of Indian Lake is February 11th.
Cool.
So paperback release of The Angel of Indian Lake, March 18th, Buffalo Hunter, which fuck you, Greg, for having a copy of that.
Right.
Someone was, so, all right, now that this beautiful sinners group exists, so we talk to each other all the time and stuff, and we were having a discussion about the arc of The Only Good Indians that came out in 2020 and about the authenticity, or maybe there was different versions of stuff. And one of our group posted a picture of their empty hand as if they were holding a book that wasn't there. And they're like, this is my arc. And I replied, wipe your tears off on that arc of Buffalo Hunter that you have.
That was hysterical. Yeah. I love that.
So yeah, the Buffalo Hunter, March 18th, April 29th. Tor is kind of confusing me a little bit because they're reissuing Mapping the Interior, which I didn't believe was out of print, but they have a new cover for it. And I'm not sure if there's any different content inside. Do you guys know anything else besides the new cover art?
Not yet.
I haven't heard. Yeah, I will say I like the cover art. I think it's more clearly related to the subject of the book than the original artwork. And the original artwork looks really, really nice. I think that the image that they show on the front is helpful. But no, as far as I know, the original is still in print. Yeah, there we go. Beautiful artwork. But there's something about the new one kind of look, a look at the side of a trailer, essentially trailer home. And it's kind of what's the ominous underneath of that trailer is in the picture there. But I'm gonna order it. I want it. I want the new cover.
All right. So after mapping the interior, what I have on the list for July 15th is a. This is kind of. All right, you guys might know more about this, but this is kind of weird. Maybe it's not weird. So The Babysitter Lives was an audiobook only release in 2022, I believe. And now it's coming out through Simon Saga. Saga is releasing The Babysitter Lives and Killer on the Road as like a 2 novel.
Yeah, it's like a flip book. You'll actually like flip it around to see the book
Yeah.
on the other side and kind of start in from the other direction. But it's 2 full novels. Killer on the Road and The Babysitter Lives. I've been eager to see The Babysitter Lives in print because it's such an ambitious project. The only physical media of it is the CD,
Sure.
and I'm
Yeah,
kind of a
audiobook
physical
CD.
media freak on the things that I really love. So I bought the CD, but now we'll actually have it in print. Really excited about that.
Yeah.
A horrifying, terrifying haunted house scenario where he kind of takes his very reinventive sort of approach to the haunted house. But then Killer on the Road, which there is a copy of it in the Sowell Collection papers. I did see a note from like some correspondence between Stephen and his agent talking about how excited he was for Killer on the Road, and mentioned some kind of antagonist, I think named Bucket Mouth. So I think we're going to see some kind of monstrous things in Killer on the Road, and that they're both coming out in the same book is really interesting, especially kind of the flipping back and forth. There's going to be two really monstrous, scary novels put together. Really excited to see the packaging around this, but this is going to be a really like a great deal for his readers, getting 2 full novels. And again, like they are full novels. This book's going to be
Yeah.
at least, it's got to be at least 400 pages, probably more than that.
Okay, I'm just gonna say it. After this one comes out, it's gonna be a huge success. So then we need a special edition, right? I'm thinking The Babysitter Lives pop-up edition
Nice. Oh, totally. Yes, a pop-up book.
with real
Absolutely.
fake blood.
Yeah. Totally.
Jesse,
For kids.
Yeah.
Do you have any insight on Killer on the Road, or had you heard it before, Jesse? Heard of it at all before?
Yeah, Killer on the Road was I believe that was written sort of around the same time that The Only Good Indians was written.
Okay.
So it kind of comes from then, and I know he had mentioned it in interviews and here and there before that that's one that's been slated for release for a while now. It got picked up, a handful of years ago, and just I think kept getting pushed back as the J. Daniels trilogy
Yeah.
took on what it did and continued to grow. And so probably having to figure out, I mean, seriously, how does a publisher figure out how to schedule Stephen's books?
Right.
It kind of defies convention. Just just how rapidly he turns these books around.
So that's the 3 that have release dates that you could probably go on and pre-order right now from an independent bookstore or bookshop.org, or maybe that other place if all else fails.
And especially for you international folks who it really may be easier to get it through Amazon. That may be the only real option for you. Certainly understand. But yeah, it's the listing for Killer on the Road / The Babysitter Lives is out on Amazon. I don't think they even have a book cover yet, but you can find a listing for it, and I think pre-order it.
By the way, all right, so before I get to the unconfirmed releases for 2025, and then we start wrapping this up, I was looking up, so I looked up The Angel of Indian Lake for the paperback release. I looked up I Was a Teenage Slasher to see about the paperback release for that. And the paperback option that shows up on Amazon right now, I believe is like, it's the cover with the belt on it.
That's the UK release
UK,
Titan.
Yeah. But you're able to Bloomsbury or whatever, whatever, that's the publisher it's listed under. You're able to order it on the US Amazon site. I didn't realize that because I was trying to see when's the paperback release of I Was a Teenage Slasher, and they just plop the UK paperback version on there. Anyway, so that was kind of confusing to me. But now I'm like, do I just order the UK paperback version of it for now, or I've already got 3 copies. I might as well have a 4th that I will share one day out of sharing the story. Love. So, all right. Anyway, sorry for that digression. Finally, kind of wrapping it up, the unconfirmed releases for 2025 right now are more reissues, also from Open Road Media, which don't have release dates and aren't kind of official, but they're on their website, so like there's some legitimacy to it. And that would be States of Grace, which again, oh my God, where's my States of Grace? States of Grace, which is probably in the top 5 most sought after, hard to find.
Yeah,
Stephen Graham out of print books.
It's 50 pieces of flash fiction.
Yeah,
it's like prose poetry. Some of these are like part of a single page, and some of them might go across 3 pages, 4 pages, or something. But they're like less than 1,500 words, and some very beautiful pieces in here. I'm so excited that this is going to be coming out, so folks have a chance to read it, because unless you're can get it through interlibrary loan. There's really no way to get this, or you might get really, really lucky. Like 2 people might find a copy of it on the open market, 2 or 3 people maybe this year. And it's very, very expensive. So that is really hard to find, but thrilled that this looks like it could be coming out from Open Road Media in maybe in the next year.
Another title that looks like it's going to be reissued from Open Road Media, The Gospel of Z, which came out from, I know I'm going to say it wrong. I know it reads as Samhain, but Samhain's, whatever, however you want to say it, which I believe is no longer an actual publisher. But this is I don't think it's as hard to find, but this was released in, I thought it was going to be easy to tell. 2014. This is a 2014. Gospel of Z is listed, so likely we'll be seeing a reissue of that. And then from Lazy Fascist Press, which I miss dearly, but I'm very excited that Cameron Pierce has a book coming out on Clash. And Cameron Pierce was the publisher for Lazy Fascist Press. Fantastic person. Zombie Sharks with Metal Teeth, which is a collection of short stories that came out, I think, around the same time. Like this one was 2013, yeah. So this had some weird stuff on it. I think that there was like something that happened in space. Yeah, it's kind of all over, but like those are the 3 that are unconfirmed reissues right now for 2025. So far, who knows what else is coming.
So yeah, I'm really excited that we've got multiple publishers working to bring Stephen Graham Jones's back catalog back into print, and great strides have been made this year. And next year, we're going to get more. I think we're going to see at least most of his book catalog back in print and available for readers in the next maybe 2-3 years.
Selfishly, I really want The Least of My Scars to be something that people are like. Least of My Scars. So Least of My Scars came out around that kind of like early 2010s era, and when people who are newer to Stephen Graham Jones, so by newer I mean like you've been reading him since like The Only Good Indians, start digging into the back catalog. Sadie Hartman at one point said, "Oh yeah, I just finished reading the most disturbing Stephen Graham Jones thing I've ever read," and I was like, "Oh, so you read The Least of My Scars?" So it's just like one of those things where it's like, all I'm going to say,
among his readers who know his work pretty well,
yeah,
there is that one book, and it's The Least of My Scars, which is available on Kindle. It looks like I'm just looking at Amazon right now. It looks like paperbacks you can only get from kind of the open or the aftermarket. But at least it's available on Kindle. It's like less than 200 pages. It's a pretty short novel, but it's the most disturbing thing I've ever read.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll just say storage unit, and then I'll just move on. So Uh,
Oh my gosh.
all right. Anyway, guys, so the whole focus of this episode was to like for me at least is I've always had this baseline. Just don't. All right, for anybody who wants to get into podcasting, don't make a hand gesture that makes you hit your microphone. This is the least professional thing you can do after clapping. I've always had this baseline kind of like anything that Steven releases, I'm going to pick up and I'm going to read because I really appreciate. I'm a fan of his stuff. He writes great books. This year was like such an anomaly as far as like how much he's producing. This is far beyond like any, even when he was just completely on independent presses and releasing multiple books a year, this far outpaces anything he's ever released in one year before. And so it was special enough that it bears conversation, like, and hopefully people who listen to this, it'll be informational for them. It'll be nice for them to kind of like hear just kind of a summary of like what a crazy year this was in the world of Stephen Graham Jones, and that it looks like the momentum is keeping, at least for now, into 2025. And so excited to see, what comes of it. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation. Also, I always just love talking to the both of you. So let's end it out by, I'm going to ask you guys both, and I'm thinking of the question I'm going to ask you right now, but your favorite Stephen Graham Jones whatever. So whether it's something you read, something that he said, character, whatever it happens to be, just something, and it doesn't have to be from this year, but yeah, just your favorite. What's the thing you want to say about Stephen Graham Jones or his work to round out the end of this conversation? And whoever speaks up first gets to go first, so the other person can have some time to think.
Demerit, that is totally unfair question. One thing?
Dude, all right, break the rule then. Say more than one thing. I don't care.
There you go. See, that's probably even worse for my brain because it's just going to like endlessly spin and spin on all that, and it can't even then pick what it wants to talk about. Honestly, there's so many things. I could just like reach out and grab them. At least of my scars, man. I mean, there's something special about that one in particular. And William Colton Hughes, I mean, every story has a little piece of magic in it. Even, we've seen things that, that are now seeing the light of day that maybe weren't released before because, I don't know, maybe somebody failed to see. Even sounds bad saying failure on their part. It's not necessarily true, but something that wasn't perhaps appreciated in its time. He's ahead of it, like at every step too. And it's really hard to be one of those artists who's ahead of everything and being the first. That's the rough spot. You don't want to be first, although you kind of do because you're just breaking all that ground. But yeah, when you're paving the way, sometimes it takes a little bit for the rest of the world to catch up.
I'm going to agree that there's something special about The Least of My Scars. It's not the first book that I read of his, but yeah, there's something in there, man, that's just special. I agree.
He has talked about this on interviews before, but he lost something like 20 to 25 pounds while writing that book. It made him so sick to write the things he had to write to describe the inner world of a serial killer. I mean, a horrible, horrible person doing horrible things. And I think that speaks to, one, his dedication as an artist. I don't know how he gets into that headspace. He's writing about things that I know really disturb him, especially as a father and a husband. He writes some just horrible, horrible things in that book. But he I think that's part of how he deals with his own fear, and deals
Yep.
with his perception of a world that, at its worst, is truly, truly horrific. He puts it on paper, and that's how he's in part processing it. Um, but yeah, I'd say my one thing that I think is just like a hidden gem is it's in this journal called the Wrong Tree Review, issue volume one, issue one. It's You can actually get a copy. I'm pretty sure it's print on demand from lulu.com, lulu.com. You have to look around for Wrong Tree Review, volume one, issue one. But there's a story in here called The Lazarus Complex. It is basically a sci-fi story, and it's got one of the scariest ideas I've ever encountered. I definitely recommend that. It's the only place right now you can find it is in Wrong Tree Review. But the other thing I'd say, just kind of a general observation, is that Stephen, he doesn't run around saying, I'm an Indian writer, I'm a Native American writer. He's a writer, but his indigenous heritage is clearly part of who he is. It has been, his entire life. It is very much there in his writing, and it has made me so much more aware in reading his work and in just getting to talk with him, interact with him as a person. It's made me so much more aware that the harm that's been done to indigenous people in North America is not ancient past. Like, this is stuff that indigenous people, that the Native American people on our continent are still dealing with now. And being able to see Martin Scorsese's recent film, really, like, this is stuff that was going on, in pretty close to my mom and dad's lifetime. This is not ancient history. Or seeing a documentary that came out early this year about the Black Hills, that sacred space for the Lakota Dakota people. It's just made me more aware of harms done to indigenous people in America. And he says some things that, for me, as kind of as a white guy, whose family goes back in America maybe 16, 17 generations, as opposed to maybe 70 generations of Native Americans. He said some things that make me uncomfortable. And I know that I need to listen to them and become more aware of them. Also, I love Stephen, and I think of him as a friend. I don't want to be presumptuous with that, but he's someone who not only has something difficult that I need to hear, but I want to hear it from him, because I guess I feel like he's on my side. He's telling stories that encourage me and that are thrilling, that are scary, and when he sticks the landing on a great story, it is so exciting. Even if the story is very dark, there's a sense of glee in me, because he really made that story work. In that sense, I think he's writing for me, and I want to hear what he has to say, even when it can be uncomfortable at times. So yeah, that's just a general observation there about his work.
And my contribution will be a couple things. This is something I've been thinking about authors in general, but this definitely applies. And this is the thing that Greg probably will be chasing to the end of his days, is don't just go to the bookstore and find the stuff that's on the shelf. There's so many other things that you can find out there that are fantastic that maybe you're not fully aware of, whether it's in anthologies or it's like released on its own. Attack of the 50-Foot Indian, The Night Cyclist. There's so many random individual little releases that are gems that are just waiting to be found. So yeah, go out and find them. And then I will say that one of the things that I've always liked about Stephen Graham Jones's approach to his writing is that when he writes about something, I genuinely feel like he honors the topic. And what I mean by that is, like, if he's writing a slasher, he knows about slashers, and beyond knowing about slashers, he understands them. And I think that taking the time to understand the thing that you are writing about is not something that everybody does, but it's always very obvious that when this person writes on a subject, he is fully like he understands what it is and what it means. And if anybody wants any kind of indication of how deep that knowledge can go, there's like a 10-minute video of him floating around YouTube where he just explains the history of zombies in stories. And things that he mentions as if everybody knows about them is shit that I'm like, what did he say? What? But like, you could tell he spent so much time learning about the thing to have a just casual list of things that he can go off the top of his head with. So that's something that I think is very admirable in an author, is when you take the time to care enough to understand the topic as you're writing it. And I think that his understanding just goes maybe deeper than some, but it's very obvious in the way that he writes that he takes a lot of care to understand it. And I think because of that, he also contributes to it or makes it more than it was, or something to that effect too. So,
if you want to find some more, like you talk about trying to find not just the stuff on the bookstore shelves, Rob, but
yeah,
really go back and try to find some of maybe his lesser known, especially early stories. Go to Google, type in Stephen Graham Jones juked.com. That's JUKED.com. It's a literature website that's been out there for I think 25 years. Stephen has maybe like 8 or 10 short stories on this site. Some of which will probably have shown up in like Zombie Sharks with Metal Teeth and maybe some other collections. But these are stories that are not as well. One of them is called "I Was a Teenage Slasher Victim." But you go out and take a look at that. Like you'll find some of his earlier works just on websites that you've maybe not even heard of before. It's really interesting, the search for so much of his work. It's just spread across the internet, spread across literary journals, anthologies. Like Ellen Datlow his stories will appear in a number of her anthologies, and a lot of them have not been collected yet. I do hope there'll be some omnibus collection of all of his short stories at some point. But like some of this work is like flash fiction. It really isn't more than 500 words, and it appeared on a website that doesn't exist anymore. Yep. But if you know how to work the Internet Archive and you know what you're looking for, you might be able to find it. Juked.com is one of those good sources. But to me, like, again, like as the guy who loves going into archives and finding these little gems that have been kind of hidden from view, for out of sight for a long time, he has at least 350 discrete pieces of fiction, from flash fiction all the way up to novels in length and everything in between. He even in the archives, I even found some early like college age poetry that he'd written. I don't know if any of his poems have been published, but he definitely did some work with poetry as well, kind of in his learning to write. But yeah, there's so much really, really interesting stuff out there.
All right, final question before we wrap up this episode. And this isn't going to be one of those like, oh, I have to prepare an answer and it's so tough. Are we still doing a deep dive of this? I Was a Teenage Slasher. We still want to do a deep dive on that?
I can do that. It's gonna. I can't do it immediately. I'd have to wait until probably November. I'm trying to wrap up a lot of stuff first. But yeah. I would tell you what, a nice punchy conversation on Tolly and Amber would be, I think, well received, because that book has really appealed to a lot of people. Yeah, and I think it is a good place for new readers, new people who are new to Stephen Graham Jones. It's a really good entry point. Like Mongrels, it's a good entry point. And like Mongrels, it reinvents that slasher from the inside of from the slasher's point of view, just like Mongrels reinvents the werewolf mythos.
Yep.
There's a lot there to talk about, and you get such a sense of this place, this time and place, and the hair metal and all of that. and he creates, and he even has a name, Strappy.
Yeah.
He's given this character a name, a nickname. I love it, Strappy. Like, who would ever think the belt will be his main weapon? Like, that's
Right?
brilliant, because it's one of these things you would just find lying around
It's at
anywhere.
hand. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and he made it work. So,
So
yeah,
I'm taking that as a yes that we are still going to do a deep dive into I Was a Teenage Slasher.
I'm on board. I need to review it,
Yeah.
probably reread it, re-listen to it. The
I have
audiobook also, the guy Michael Crouch who narrated it. Good grief, we need to talk about that, because that dude sounds Texan, and he performs it so well. It's like an
Nice.
actor in New York, but he grew up in Texas.
All right. Well, it's official. I'm going to hold you to it. You said
Yeah.
it on a podcast. That's it's a verbal contract. Jesse, thank you so much as always for
Thank you.
joining, and Greg as well. You guys are my Stephen Graham Jones ultra fan club, and I just love it when we get together and talk about this stuff. So I really, really appreciate both of you guys taking the time.
We're in the Stephen Graham Jones zone here with Rob, Jesse, and Greg.